Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Larry McDonough, and on behalf, as president of the Midwest chapter, I'd like to welcome you all to Chicago. Thanks for being here. So just some trivia, okay, and it might be covered in the contest tonight, but this is actually the fourth conference that's been held in Chicago. The first was held here in 1994, the second in 2001, the third in 2010, and of course here we are today in 2015. This is our 20th conference as a family. Barb, Mike, Chris, and I. It's our 20th conference, and actually our son Chris was diagnosed in 1993. So really throughout the 20 conferences we've attended, really the annual conference has really been something that's really been very important to us as we've traveled on this journey. I want to say that, and I want to reach out to really everyone here who's at a different stage in their journey to let you know that you're among friends, and then also, too, that we have a very good program planned for everyone. There's something here for everyone. So please remember that. Also, too, I'd like to take this time to, for a special thanks to the BDSRA staff, Margie, Becky, and Tracy, who've done an excellent job. They have been working with us along with the Midwest chapter planning team, and again, a shout out to them as well. Everyone on the Midwest chapter planning team, we've worked very well together with BDSRA to put this conference together. So thanks to one and all, and again, enjoy the conference. Thank you for being here. Also, too, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dave Kennicott right now, who will introduce our speaker, first speaker. Dave?
Good morning. First off, I was asked last night to let everybody know there's going to be a photographer here tomorrow between 5 and 9 to do family portraits, and there's going to be a sign-up sheet in the registration room that you can go do, and it's a $10 sitting fee. Very, very cost-effective, and it's a friend of ours that's a photographer. She's very good, and she'll send you everything on email later on, so go sign up for that, and you'll enjoy it. Our speaker today feels more like it's a little brother of mine than a friend of ours. But back when I was growing up in South Barrington, my childhood idol moved in across the street, and it's Jarrett's dad, Walter Payton. And you know, Jarrett was 4 at the time, so we became friends. I became his babysitter. I had a pool. He couldn't swim. It was a short-lived problem. He learned to swim the hard way. And, you know, when Jarrett was 12, I watched him induct his father into the NFL Hall of Fame, and I was unbelievably impressed, a 12-year-old boy getting out in front of thousands like that and speaking and introducing his dad. I knew the kid was destined to be on TV, radio, and speak publicly. In 1997 or 98, I think it was, Jarrett's family and his dad did what all of us have done, went on a search for a diagnosis to an ailment. And in 98, he was diagnosed with a very rare liver disease. And in 1998 or 1999, in November of 99, his father passed away from the liver disease. So Jarrett knows a lot of what we've all go through and deal with. He did it in a very young age and in a very short time. Jarrett went on after that, after his dad's passing, to play football at the University of Miami. He was a 2004 MVP of the Orange Bowl. He's gone on to play in the NFL Europe, the NFL, the CFL, arena football, my backyard. We've done it all. Jarrett started his own family, or his own foundation that's is committed to impacting it's committed to anti-bullying and positive impacting on children of all ages. It's a great organization. And I'd just like to say it's my pleasure to introduce Jarrett as my little brother and have him come up here and speak to you guys today.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. Can I use this? Hello? I can? Hello? Hello? There we go. Good morning, everyone. I feel like I'm in my backyard, you know? Feels good to wake up. And then when I called David this morning because I didn't want to, I have a new TV show that's on CLTV. I don't know if everybody gets that in here from here, but you got to tune in every day, Sunday through Thursday. But I've been wearing suits a lot lately, so I don't get to wear jeans anymore. So I text David this morning, I'm like, and I got half a suit on already. I'm about to button up my shirt. I go, Dave, what should I wear? He goes, a tuxedo. I was like, what? I don't have my tuxedo ready yet. And then he said, no, I'm just joking. And it's funny because our relationship is pretty much the same, but back in those days when he was telling you guys I couldn't swim, we didn't have cell phones back then. You actually had to go over to your best friend's house to say hello and to have conversation. So to see where we are right now, it's always an honor. And when he told me that, you know, it'd be cool for me to be here, I love to be able to share my story with everybody. The one thing that I speak about is about greatness. And every single morning that I wake up, I post a tweet or a post on Facebook, and the hashtag has become, it's Be Great. And the reason why is because I had a chance in my life to be able to be around some great people. One of them was my father, who lived in the house with me, who I got to see on a daily basis of what greatness was all about. And I started to really break it down after my dad passed away, of figuring out what made him so great and what made the people around him so great. Because it wasn't just them playing football or being a celebrity, it was something deeper about who they were as people and why we look at people and say, wow, that person is truly great. And I have some stories that I'm going to share with you guys that you'll probably never hear from anywhere else, only stories that I could tell you. And it goes back to a certain time. It was 1992. The 90s were a weird time for me because I got to see some cool things. But one night I'm sitting in my house, someone knocks on the door, and my dad whistled because I was in my room. He says, son, go get the door. So I just ran upstairs. Next thing you know, I open up the door, and as I open up the door, I'm looking up at this big, tall guy, and I'm staring at him. I'm 12 years old. I'm like, I know you. You're Michael Jordan. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, you gonna let me in? So I look at him and I go, man, I saw you play last night, man. You pretty good last night. He goes, it's kind of cold out here, son. I said, yeah, man, but you missed those 2 free throws last night. And by the time I could say free throws, my dad came behind me with his big arms and his big hands and pushed me, like stiff-armed me over to the closet. So I was like, dang, Dad, what's going on? So Michael Jordan comes into my house. And as he walks in the door with him and his 2 bodyguards, they both all come in, they got these black trench coats on, and I'm like, man, look at these guys. But I tell kids this story all the time. But they think that, they go, what kind of car did he drive? See, Michael Jordan didn't come over to my house in a Bentley or a Maserati. Michael Jordan came to my house in South Barrington in a Geo Tracker. You remember those? A white one with fluorescent pink and green stripes on the side. And I don't know how 6'6" Michael Jordan got out of that car, but he did. And came in the house. And so normally when you walked into the door, and I told you I got stiff-armed to the closet that was right across by the door, when company came over, we never put the coats in that closet because it was filled with my mom's fur coats and all the coats that my dad got from Burt Reynolds back in the day, because he used to send my dad all these leather jackets. So what we did was we took our company's coats and we put them on our washer and dryer. And so I remember them giving me their coats, and I couldn't see, but I just made my way all the way to the laundry room, and I set their coats down, and I was upstairs like super excited. I'm like, man, Michael Jordan's here. Like, what are they doing? So they made their way downstairs by my dad's bar. And my dad had, you know, little poker games set up, and they're about to play some cards, because I don't know if you guys know, Michael Jordan likes to gamble a little bit, but it is, you know, friendly wagers. So I remember getting that whistle again. My dad, so I ran downstairs. My dad looked at me and he said, "Mike's got something to ask you, son." So I'm like, "Oh, Mike, what do you got for me?" He said, "Listen, go upstairs and go to my coat and get the money that's in my coat." You guys, I'm telling you, if they would have timed my 40-yard dash at that moment, I figured out I ran a 4-1 up the stairs into the kitchen. My baby sister, she wasn't baby, she's not a baby, but she was, she had to be at least 7 years old. And she heard me running upstairs, and she came through like, "Jarrett, what's going on?" And I stiff-armed her real quick, threw into the laundry room, and I go into Michael Jordan's coat pocket, and I take out money, and I'm just like, they're all rolled up with rubber bands, 5s, 10s, 20s, 50s, 100s. I'm walking downstairs with a bundle of money. I just got it in my hands, and I remember putting it onto the bar. "There you go, Mike." He goes, "Man, you sound out of breath." I go, "Yeah." He goes, takes out a $5 bill and gives it to me. So 12 years old, $5 bill. That's gonna buy you a lot of candy and milk at school the next day. So I ran upstairs and put it in my piggy bank. I'm like, "Man, I just got $5 from Michael Jordan. This is great." So about 2 hours later, I get that same whistle. So I ran downstairs again. And I'm watching my dad behind the bar, because he was dealing all the cards. This time, my dad doesn't have cards in his hand. He's got a big wad of money in his hand. And I'm going, "Ooh, this doesn't look good." So my dad's counting all this money, and he's smiling at me, and he's looking at Mike, and he's smiling at me. And Mike's got his head down like he's upset. And he's looking at me, and he goes, "Come here." So I come here, I walk over to him, I say, "What's going on, Dad?" He goes, he's looking through all the money, and he pulls out a $100 bill. And as he pulled it out, he's staring right at Mike, smiling at him with his sweetness smile. And he's like giving me the 100, and he goes, "Here you go, son." I go, "What's this for?" He goes, "Tell Mike thank you." So basically, my dad stole all of Mike's money, and I ended the night with $105 in my piggy bank. So all I could do was take the $100 bill, and I put it in my pocket, and I go, "Thanks, Mike," and I ran back upstairs. 3 hours later, I'm laying down in my bed, and I'm sitting there, and I can hear chatter going on downstairs. Like, what is all this chatter going on? Looked at the clock, I'm like, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, what's going on? What are they still doing down there? Looked at the clock again about an hour later, I still hear the chatter, it's 3 o'clock. I'm like, what are they doing down there? They went to 4:30 in the morning, playing everything you guys can imagine, from pool to pick-up sticks to Miss Pac-Man that we had downstairs in our basement. And I woke up the next morning, and I walked in. My dad's got his paper. He's drinking his coffee, and I remember grabbing some of the orange juice. I said, "Dad, what was going on downstairs? Why were you guys up till 4:30 in the morning?" He said, "Son, when you get 2 people like us in a room, nobody wants to lose." I said, "Dad," I'm 12 years old. I said, "Dad, somebody has to lose." He said, "Son, one day you will understand." Fast forward a little bit to a couple month later, we ended up going to the Bulls versus the Knicks in the old stadium. My dad was a closet Knicks fan. I have no idea how that happened. So he goes to the game, and those were the best times, because when the Bulls used to beat up on the Knicks, my dad would be in the stadium, and being who he was, he couldn't be upset because everybody thought he was cheering for Michael Jordan and the Bulls. So when the Knicks would lose, I'd be like, "Yeah, Dad, what's going on?" And he would have to try to put this smile on, and he'd be so upset. And after Michael Jordan had, I think, 25 points, 8 boards, and 7 assists, and after the game, I'm excited. I'm like, "Yeah, where are we going to get some ice cream, Dad?" And he's like, "We're going to go see Mike." I said, "Whoa, where are we going?" So we're going to go downstairs and see Mike. I said, "Let's go." So we start heading down the tunnel. We're walking, and as I'm walking, you guys and ladies, I'm watching all of my sports cards walk by me. Charles Oakley, Scottie Pippen with a gray suit on, big ring, and they're all talking about where they're going. "Yeah, I'm gonna see you later. Yeah, we're gonna go. I'm driving. I got the Corvette." You can come with me. We're gonna go get some steak. And I'm listening to all these guys like, whoa, this is unbelievable. And we get to the Bulls locker room and the door opens up. And I'm thinking Michael Jordan's gonna come out with something fresh on, right? Michael Jordan comes out with a cutoff t-shirt, new pair of shorts, and a new pair of Jordans. And him and my dad are having a conversation for about 10 minutes. And I'm trying to figure out in my head, what's going on? Why is he not dressed like everybody else? Mike talked with my dad, and then next thing you know, he said, Walter, it was good to see you. I got to go because I have to go to the weight room. And it was that moment that hit me like a ton of bricks. Because as a 12-year-old, all I'm thinking about is, why doesn't he want to either go with his friends or go home and watch himself on TV? Because he just had 25 points, 8 boards, 7 assists. They're definitely going to show a bunch of his highlights, because that's what I would want to do as a kid, right? Make sure you're looking good on TV. But I started to really understand what my dad was talking about at that moment. See, Michael Jordan was never really satisfied with just having a good game. He was more about winning championships. And what was most important to him was not just having a good game, but leaving a legacy of being the best to ever do it. That's what drove him. That's what drove him to his greatness. Most people look at him and look at what he came from and they go, well, he was just, no, Michael Jordan was not destined to be the greatest basketball player to ever play. Most people don't remember he got cut from his high school basketball team. Everybody looks at LeBron James. When he came into the league as a young man, he was on Sports Illustrated with the title, The King, Savior of the NBA. Michael Jordan had to work for everything that he got. It wasn't just given to him. So I started to look at and trying to figure this thing out. And so I started to break down what Michael Jordan's greatness was. And then you start to see other people taking the same page out of his notebook. Kobe Bryant, another person that worked hard to get what he had to get. The weight room symbolized something to me. It symbolized just our life on a daily basis when we wake up. Every single day that we wake up, it's kind of like a weight room. As you can see, my wife said it last night, baby, you look like you can still play. I was like, yeah, I know. I'm keeping myself in shape, baby. Get the turkey bacon, not the regular bacon. Turkey bacon, better for you, you know? I said to her, it's all about, because I know what it means to be in the weight room. And that one thing that you can't do is when you walk into a weight room, you can't just walk in and get big. There's no, if anybody has ever done that, please let me know your secret. Where you can just walk into the weight room and be like, yep, I got bigger today, I'll see you guys later. It doesn't happen. When you walk into a weight room, or walk into a gym, you have to put in the work to be able to get the results. It's the only way. That's the only way you see results. How bad do you want it? And with the weight room, I see it. Things weigh us down on a daily basis, you guys. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter anything. We all go through problems. We all feel that weight. And when you go into a weight room, you don't get big by just looking at the weights. You have to push weights off of you, right? That's what I want everybody in here to do, is understand when you wake up every single day and you get a chance and you're blessed to see another day, it's like a weight room. How are you going to get better that day? With everything that's going on, all the stuff that's going on in our lives, how do we be able to take that pain, that stress, and how do we actually push it off us to get us stronger? Because that's what we have to figure out. I got people now hit me up every single morning. Man, I'm in the weight room. Weight room every single day. It's a new day. We get a chance every time that our eyes open up to get something, to improve ourselves, to get better at something. And it has to start with us. I wrote this, Tracy, I was talking to you. What were we talking about this morning? About family, and the tweet, it was about, my tweet this morning is about faith and having faith. And sometimes it's all you got. And, you know, when it's all you got, sometimes it's all you need is to believe. Waking up every single morning in your weight room, I want you guys to figure out what it is that's weighing you down and how you can figure out to, you have those bad days. How do you use that as a positive and push it off you so not only you get better, but the family gets better, your partner gets better? How can you push that to other people and figure out how you can get better? What's your weight room on a daily basis? We move on to the next thing, and I go into number 2. We talk about faith. To me, the biggest thing that I've ever learned from my father was giving back in service. It's a big part of who I am. It's what I love to do. I was in my room 1992. I told you the 90s were a weird time. I was listening to, had my door locked, I was listening to Pearl Jam. I was headbanging with no hair, as you can see. I've been this way for a long time. And I was listening to Jeremy, and I was in there jamming, and my dad knocked on the door, doo, doo, doo. And I was still jamming. I couldn't really hear it because I had two 12-inch woofers over my bed. So then I'm jamming again, and doo, doo, doo. So I'm thinking that it's my speakers. And the third time, it made me stop and look at the door, and I'm like, man, someone knocking? And it was that moment where I was in my room, and yeah, it was my room, but it was my dad's house. So he picked the lock. And you guys know that moment. But you know that moment where you're either coming out of the shower, in the shower, and you're singing, you think you sound good, but you're like, yeah, like you're jamming, but you don't really sound that good. And then that moment where that person is staring at you, and you got your eyes closed, you're getting your hair done, and it startles you. Well, I was doing the headbanging, and I remember doing this, and I did the full turn as I was going, and I opened up my eyes for my last air guitar solo, and I went like this, and my dad is standing in the door with a black suit on, looking at me like, son, what are you doing? Black kid listening to this with no hair? Come with me. I was like, Dad, this is Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam, the best, dude. He was like, whoa, did you just call me dude? I said, well, let me rewind that real quick. And he told me to get my jacket, and this was 4 days before Christmas. So we ended up driving, and we started driving into Schaumburg, because at the time, I thought we were going to Studebaker's. My dad had a place called Studebaker's that, we used to frequent a lot to go get stuff from. And normally we would go the back way, and my dad ends up pulling up to Toys R Us. And we get to Toys R Us, and all I can see is people's exhaust and their brake lights on. So I'm going, what's going on? Why are we here? And he said, get out, let's go. So I'm like, all right, Pops, let's go. So we start walking in, door is open, and there's 4 people standing there with carts. And I'm like, Dad, what's going on? And he said, son, listen, money is no object right now, all right? For the next hour, the store is all yours. I want you to go with these 4 people and get whatever you want. He's like, you got an hour. And I looked at him, and I was like, woohoo! Shopping spree. I said, you 4, come with me. I mean, we hit every aisle you guys can imagine at that time. I'm going to get baseball bats, basketballs. I'm getting everything. I even got myself a tennis racket. I don't even play tennis. We had a tennis court, never played tennis. I'm like, so how do I look? Should I get the wristbands with it too? So he's like, yeah, get the wristbands and the headband too. You look great. So I'm getting everything, and I'm throwing it all into the basket. I'm so excited. At that time, the hottest game console out was not PlayStation or Xbox. It was Nintendo 64. And the hottest game was Mario Kart, right? If you didn't have Mario Kart, you weren't the coolest kid on the block. So I remember vividly walking down the aisle. When I hit the corner of where the video games were, it was like my life went into slow motion. You know those old love movies where hair is flowing back and, like something like Gone with the Wind, and they're running through like pastures and everything's slow. I hit the corner, and it was like my life went into slow motion. Ooh. No hair, but my hair was flowing. I'm like, oh, this is great. And I remember it flowing, and I get down, and I'm looking, and the 64 had a blue aura around it. It was just saying, buy me, buy me. I told the man, I said, I want that right now, and I need this game. And so I had to make sure that I was, getting everything I needed. At the time, my bike was a little raggedy because David was, using it to just roll it down his long driveway and just into like trees and stuff. So I had to get a new bike. I couldn't be in South Barrington, Illinois with a raggedy bike, be Walter Payton's son. That's just not cool. So I ended up getting myself a black bike with the black riding gloves and the black helmet because I had to be fresh on the streets of South Barrington. So as I'm walking, I hear my dad come over with the loudspeakers, and he said, son, don't forget to get something for your sister. So it was at that moment where I found my way going to the Barbie aisle. I got my sister every Barbie and Ken accessory known to man at that time in '92. Everything from the Barbie house to, I got her the the Corvette, a pink one and the white one with the T-tops. And since I got myself the black mountain bike with the black riding gloves and the black helmet to be fresh on the streets of South Barrington, I got my sister the pink bike with the pink and white streamers with the My Little Pony helmet and the pink riding gloves, because she had to be fresh by me too on the street, you know? So at that moment, I'm getting everything, and a little bit after my dad got off the intercom, I didn't know that he ended up buying about 50 footballs and signed them all inside. And he took them outside. So all those people that were sitting outside with the brake lights on, my dad told me this story. He said he was sitting there, he was walking up to her window, and this lady was yelling at her husband, "Frank, I don't know what's going on. Why are they closing the store? We have to get everything for Jimmy, and we got to get stuff for Sarah. What is going on? Frank, you need to go in there and check things out." And next thing you know, my dad walked up to the window and knocked on the window, and then "Frank, I don't know what to..." "Oh my God, Frank, look who it is. It's Walter Payton." "Hey, oh my goodness, where's your camera?" "You don't have your camera? You never bring your camera." "Walter, what are you doing? It's great to see you." And my dad was like, "Merry Christmas, here's a football." He explained to all those people. It was really, really cool. And that story always gets me. So we end up leaving, and we're packing all this stuff into a Jeep Cherokee. And normally we would take a left to go home, but my dad takes a right. And we start driving down the street. And we go about underneath 53. We're driving for about 10, 15 minutes. And we get to this apartment complex. And when we get to the apartment complex, my dad says, "Son, get out." I said, "Where are we at, Dad? I mean, we just had I don't know where we're at." He said, "Son, get out." I said, "Dad, are you dropping me off somewhere? Am I in trouble?" And then he said, "Get up, get out, and open up the trunk." I said, "Dad, we just got all those toys. They're going to fall out if I open up the back." And for those who don't know or seen my dad, or if you get a chance, Google just Walter Payton headband, and there's a bunch of pictures with him with the Rules headband and the Jerry curl, and he with the stern face on the sideline. He gave me that look, and I was like, "You know what? I'm just going to open up the back because you don't look happy right now." And all those toys that I thought were going to my house for my sister and I, my dad actually found out that a couple of families in this apartment complex weren't able to have Christmas. So it was at that moment what I figured out what my passion was. And my passion was giving back in service. And I've never seen and felt the way that I felt of seeing the joy on this family's face, of how it brought them together, and everything that I thought was mine that was going to these kids, to see them being able to enjoy Christmas and enjoy family. It really did. It struck something in my heart. And so every time that I've never really had that feeling before. It was like kind of a butterfly feeling and a warm feeling inside. And so what I did was I started to figure out what passion was. I was going to base everything off of that moment now in my life. Things that I'm passionate about, things that I love. If I don't have that same feeling, if I don't have that butterfly feeling, then most likely it's not for me. And so I started to see in different things in my life of getting that feeling. Like the day that I asked my wife to marry me, I got that same feeling. Like I knew it. I was like, yeah, this is it. I got that feeling. And the day that I held my son in my hands, that first day I got that feeling. I'm like, yeah, this is it. Like, this is that feeling. And so what I tell people is let your passion wake you up every single morning that you wake up. I was just telling David this morning that my passion wakes me up at 6 o'clock every morning. This little kid saying, "Daddy, wake up." My son, he wakes me up every single morning. And so I started to see that understanding of being able to give back and to do what you do and not just do it by yourself, but with others. That was the reason why I started my foundation. So seeing everybody come together for this conference this weekend, this is what it's about. It's about coming together as a team. Everybody coming together from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and coming together to figure things out together. And I know it sounds cliche, but team. Together everybody achieves more. It's right. More rooms, more minds on what's going on. It helps for everybody because everybody's going through something different. This might be the same, it might be kind of all in the same realm, but everybody's dealing with it different. How can everybody in here help each other out? Team. Figuring out what your passion is and what wakes you up. It's a big deal. I go into my next thing, and it's about working out and not just having passion for what you do, but how hard sometimes things are. Back before I knew David, I was at my house in Arlington Heights. And you remember the old TVs where you had to crank to get the TV station you wanted? I remember sitting there cranking, watching Channel 7, and it was the summertime. And I'd be sitting there and I would listen to this lady, and she'd be it'd be the Channel 2 News, and they'd be like, yeah, this is Frank, we're gonna go to Sarah and the weather. And he'd be like, thanks, Frank. So as you can see, it's a hot summer day here in Chicago, and it's going to be 110 degrees outside, so please stay inside. Don't go outside because you can melt. Make sure that you're by a pool. If you're by a pool, make sure you have some lemonade and some shade, and have your fans ready, everybody. Thank you very much. Back to you. And I'd be sitting there, and my dad would be behind me and be like, son, yep, it's time to go to work. And I'd be like, Daddy, did you not hear what she just said? She said you could melt if you go outside. I mean, everybody called him Sweetness, so I thought he was made out of chocolate for real. Dad, you could melt. Don't go outside. He's like, time to go to work, Dad. I'll see you guys. Connie, see you in a little bit. I'm going to the hill. Dad, what? And my dad would go to the hill by Buffalo Grove High School, and he'd run up and down this hill every single day in the summertime. When most people would listen to say that it's not possible and you shouldn't do something, he was taking that a step further. He was going out and he was making it happen and getting better while other people were sitting inside. Or, Walter, you shouldn't do that. Or me telling my dad, Dad, don't go outside. You shouldn't do that. Everybody else is staying inside. He figured out ways to find his greatness that way. So everybody wants to look at him and go, whoa, you watched him play. I've watched a lot of football in my life, and I know there's other people in here that have too. But my dad is hands down the greatest all-around player to ever walk this face of this earth, right? And it didn't just come from him just having all the talent, because like Michael Jordan, he wasn't the greatest talent. He worked harder than anybody else. So when he got out on that hill, he ran up and down that hill while most people were inside still waiting there or saying that it's not possible. He made it possible. He turned it. And when you say, oh, you can't, he pushed it past possible. He took it another level. That's why people are talking about him to this day. He's talked about it every single day since he's been gone in '99 by somebody who I probably don't know. Not even just in my house. Every day. No, you guys don't understand. Every day. People pass away and they're not talked about. They get forgotten, right? He is talked about every day. I walk down the street and someone will be like, met your dad at Jewel. Yeah, saw him there. He's getting chips. Great guy. I'm like, what? Where does this happen? But he was out there running this hill. And the hill symbolizes just how it's so easy to stay at the bottom of the hill, right? When people tell you that it can't happen or you can't do it. But to get up the hill, it takes a little bit. It's different than the weight room. To get up the hill, you have to pull yourself up the hill. So how many times do you want to get yourself up and down? Because you can go up and you can come down and just stay down. But getting back up to the top of the hill is the best way to kind of survey your landscape and see everything that's out there. And that's what we battle with. I can't do this. No, you can do this. And I can't get through this. No, you can get through this. It's not always going to be easy. Yeah, the first time's not going to be easy. The second time won't be easy. But guess what? After you keep doing it repetition after repetition, it becomes worth it. We got to figure out, that's where you start to look at all these different things that I've talked about the weight room and figuring out what your passion is, to working hard, because as the transitions all the way through, yeah, see, when you don't really want to do something, your passion is going to say, listen, we got to make this happen. We got to push this past possible. How are we going to do it? Well, you know, they said it can't be. Well, we're not thinking that way. Honey, we got to figure out how to do this, and we're going to do this as a family. We're going to figure this thing out. Pushing it past possible. Figuring out how to be able to get yourself up and down that hill so you can get up to the top of the hill and survey everything that's going on. My last thing that I enjoy talking about, it's a story from high school. Doesn't have to do with my dad or Michael Jordan. It has to do with one of my old teachers and being present for your opportunities. Miss Anderson was one of my favorite teachers in 3rd grade, and she used to make the best cupcakes. I used to just love going to school. I'd be like, Miss Anderson, you got cupcakes this week? No, JP, not this week. Okay, will you let me know, please? And one day I ended up deciding not to feel, I made the manufacturer the cough. I'm not going to go to school today. And I wanted to stay home to watch Thundercats and eat Twix and my mom's great spaghetti and cheese. Oh, so I stayed home and I go to school the next day and get in Miss Anderson's class. And as I walk in, everybody's like, yo, guess what you missed yesterday? I'm like, what? Miss Anderson brought those cupcakes yesterday. I was like, what? And with that moment, I remember feeling so just like destroyed inside, because how could I miss out on Miss Anderson's cupcakes? And so I vowed that I would never, miss out of it if I didn't have to be. I was always going to be present for being at a place. That's why I don't like missing anything. People ask me to do something, more than likely I'm trying to figure out, because I don't like to miss, because it's an opportunity to meet great people, to meet somebody who I can share my story with. And so I started to see, what is it all about? Don't miss out on those opportunities. And we all have opportunities that come to us, and sometimes things change. And when things change, you got to figure out. But opportunity, there's three things in life that I look at that are always changing, forever changing. One is your opportunity. It might come back around, but more than likely it's not coming around in the same form. So take advantage of that opportunity when it's there, because it might come back around, but it wasn't the same opportunity. Take advantage of that opportunity at that moment. The second thing is your words. You can say something, and you can say something, but you never can get it back. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. You already said it. I tell these kids nowadays, when you post something on social media, just know, oh, I didn't mean to say that about Sarah. Let me delete it. But then you got Jimmy over here who goes, you see this? Screenshot is still there. So be very conscious of what you put out there and what you say, that you can't get it back. And the last thing is time. The time is always going to be going and forever changing. And the one thing that you have to do is take advantage of the time right now. David talked about my dad being gone in '99. It was probably the weirdest thing for me, because the one thing that I wish I had right now was just a little bit of time with him. Just to show him and see, so he could talk about where I'm at right now, what he taught me, for him to have time to see my son. Time is so valuable. Take advantage of it. And I know sometimes we don't think about it, but one of his quotes was, we're not promised tomorrow. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And so we have to enjoy what's going on right now. And everybody always says, it's so cliche, oh, make every second count. Or, no, for real, make every second count. Because even though we wake up in the morning and our eyes are open, we're not guaranteed the next day. We don't know if we're guaranteed the entire day. So you actually have to make every second count while we're here. Enjoy the time with our loved ones. Enjoy the time with our family. Enjoy the time as a community. That's what it's about. You can't take the money. I laugh at people that are always like, man, I got to make sure listen, I understand in life, now being a parent and seeing how everything costs money to keep the heat on, medical, all this stuff. But I know the one thing that my dad said to me was, son, listen, you can't take any of that with you, and the one thing that's going to stay with you forever is your last name. Don't dirty it up. Make sure you take advantage of it. Make sure that you nurture it. And so I started to see what he was saying. It's not just about the Payton name, it's about family. Understanding what it means to have family. And my wife looked at me this morning walking out the house, and I go, we were watching Suits. I don't know if you guys see Suits, the TV show, but the other day, Wednesday, this lady, Jessica, the lady, was walking out of the room, and the man had his feet up on the desk, and he goes, I love her. And I looked at her, and I said, remember watching Suits, babe? She goes, yeah. I go, I love you. And she looked at me, and she goes, we're family. We're all that we got. And it hit me, and I go, ooh, I really do love you. Goodness, we are. It is, and it's about community. It's about coming together. It's kind of figuring out what it's all about. And so I really do. I look at what everybody's doing today, what everybody came together in this room for this weekend. Just take advantage of getting to know everybody that you have, because we all have that weight room. We got to figure out how to push things off of us, right? Things get heavy. We also got to be able to know what our passions are and our visions are, because our passions are going to drive us. And you got to look at number 3 and looking at working and working through and trying to get it up that hill, because we're all going to have those days where we don't feel like going back up the hill, but it's got to be us to figure out how to get our family back up that hill so we can see everything that's going on. And the last thing is, don't miss out on opportunities. Opportunities to get to know somebody, opportunities to be able to have community, to understand the time that you have with your family, because you don't want to be like me back in 3rd grade and missing out on those cupcakes because, like my dad's nickname, you could miss out on something sweet. So take advantage of the time. I appreciate you guys having me today, and everybody just have a blessed weekend. I'm so glad I had an opportunity to come speak with you guys, all right? Thank you very much. Now I get to run this? No, I'm just joking.
Thank you so much, Jarrett. We're so happy. We're so happy that you're here. I think his lead off about champions and the mind of a champion is perfect for this morning, because we have so many champions in the room and so many champions for all the work that we do. I have a special champion I would like to invite up for a little chat with you. John Link, could you come join us for a second?
Thanks, Margie, and thanks for asking me to follow Jarrett. I'm not happy to be here at this moment because, well, let me tell you, my colleagues in science and medicine, some of them continue to do their work and do their work and do their work and do their work and do their work, and one day they don't come in. And others decide, I'm going to retire and I'm going to do something else for a while. And so let me say a few words about Kathy Sims. Most of you who have been part of this organization for a long time don't need any introduction to Dr. Sims. Some of you are new and you have probably heard her name or met her already. Dr. Sims is a child neurologist. She is one of the 3 that I consider to be the triumvirate of clinical Batten disease in the United States. When I first got interested in Batten disease, brought into it by David Pierce, the people to meet were Christina Wisniewski and Rosie Bastani and Kathy Sims. And I remember my first meeting of the Medical Advisory Board, the first year it existed for the BDSRA Medical Advisory Board. I sat down next to this woman who I hadn't really met before, and I think I made an offhanded comment about, I hear that Kathy Sims recommends something. She said, oh, I'm Kathy Sims. So even then, I was invoking her name as someone who was really expert. I could do the usual, here's her CV, and she went to Middlebury College, and she went to Columbia University Medical School, and she mapped the Nori disease gene. But I think the thing that I think is most impressive about Dr. Sims is she was doing things really at the forefront. When she founded the DNA Diagnostic Lab at Mass General in 1994, it was really when DNA diagnostics was in its infancy, and really developed that into the premier molecular diagnostic, university-based molecular diagnostic program in the country, and one of the top in the world, if not the top. She has a long career as what we call in the business a triple threat. A successful researcher who has actually had a major impact on several fields. A wonderful, award-winning, recognized clinician and teacher. She was the director of the Child Neurology Residency Program at Mass General for the same 10 years I was director of the Rochester Child Neurology Program, and so got to know her in that capacity as well. She's been the chair of the BDSRA Medical Advisory Board since its inception. And now, I didn't know this about her until a meeting for a new collaboration. She is going to step down from her position and paint. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. And I wish that I had that kind of talent where I could look forward to doing something that would amount to something. I wanted to be a neuroanatomist when I got started in science. And my mentor of a month told me, you should do something else because you can't draw. So without further ado, again, she needs very little introduction to this group, has really been a real leader in all aspects of Batten disease in all its forms, and is a wonderful colleague and now collaborator, and I think we will all miss her, and I hope, Kathy, that even though you're retiring, you'll send us a postcard from time to time. On behalf of the BDSRA, I have a little something for you, a bouquet of paintbrushes.
Thank you, John, for your kind words. And like all of us, I hope we can bring more beauty into the world. It's been such an honor for me to be part of this community. It's an emotional day for me. And thank you. Thank you for all that I've learned from all of you. It's really my personal pleasure to introduce Dr. Catherine Swoboda to this audience, really to this amazing community of people, patients, families, friends, researchers, clinicians, foundation administrators, everyone that has come together for so long to give each other support and to teach and to learn from. Catherine has great skills that I think she will bring, fine talents as a hardworking, dedicated, compassionate physician. She'll be a good partner to this community, I think. She has excellent creative, robust focus skills as a translational researcher, and this will be helpful to the field and to move it forward, I hope. And honestly, I really respect her energetic, tenacious, and creative spirit. Catherine was superbly trained at Harvard in neurology and genetics and neuromuscular disease, and we were successful in recruiting her from her professorship in the University of Utah to be the first endowed incumbent of the Sims Chair in Neurogenetics at MGH, and this is terrific. In that role, she'll be a leader in clinical neurogenetics in the DNA diagnostic lab, we hope, the clinical lab, as well as clinical translational research. And really, it's my honor to pass the torch to her. She's going to talk today to us about another of her passions, something which I think is extremely important to the Batten's community, as many of you I know also believe, and that is newborn screening. Please give her a warm welcome. Introduce yourself, share your stories, your insights, your concerns. I think she's very eager to become part of this community, and I think it'll be a wonderful partnership. Thank you. Thank you for all the years.
It's not at all a raid. Well, thank you for such a warm welcome. Obviously, I'm not here to fill Kathy Sims' shoes. No one can do that. I'm the recipient of this wonderful new opportunity to be the chair in Neurogenics. I'm very grateful for that. And I think exactly what Jared said this morning is something that I've embraced, is I try to really look at each day as an opportunity for new things, for new directions, and to work on building skills. And that's been particularly something that I've applied to rare diseases, not the NCLs. So as a disclaimer, I want to say that in my entire lifetime before I came to this conference, I'm not a specialist in NCL. I'd seen a total of 6 patients with NCL. That's not uncommon even for a neurogeneticist, even for someone who's spent as many years as I have in child neurology, because we are all specialists in different areas. In fact, I started training as an adult neurologist. But what was my passion in adult neurology was getting to rotate through the Boston Children's Hospital and seeing all of these rare disordered patients in the muscular dystrophy clinics, and the movement disorder clinics, and saying, you know, this is an opportunity for early intervention. This is, you know, what I want to take further with my neurology training, is to be able to not just, you know, fix closer to my, can I do this? Will that? Yeah, not just to, is that on? Is it on? Is that good? Okay. Not just to treat symptoms, not just to, you know, provide palliative care, which is so important and so much of what I do on a regular basis, but to actually diagnose and intervene as early as possible in a diagnosis. So I made the decision after completing my adult neurology training to go back and do pediatric genetics, which was one of the best decisions I made at Boston Children's to do that, and then also to get additional skills in clinical trials and things like that to help me go move forward in terms of treating rare diseases. So I wanted to talk to this group in particular about, I'm not an expert in Batten disease, but I have become a bit of an expert on thinking about what are the maximal benefits of various approaches to try to really make inroads on rare, particularly neurodegenerative diseases. And the neuronal lipofuscinoses are, in fact, bad neurodegenerative diseases. They present in different ways at different ages. But you've all been living that day in and day out. You know this is a bad group of diseases. You in many ways have been blessed with new opportunities because you have wonderful children with these diseases. You've met wonderful new members, but I'm sorry, no one signed up to be part of this team. It's a great team, it's an awesome team, but you probably didn't envision, you know, that you were going to be a part of this team. And that's what I think is so inspiring about rare disease partnerships like this, is it's so critical to move forward and be a team. And it crosses a number of disciplines. You can't do it just with a neurologist or a geneticist. You can't do it just with a clinician. You need basic science researchers. You need families to help advocate. You need guidance from psychologists, physical therapists, you know, multidisciplinary at every level. So why am I talking about newborn screening? So newborn screening has become a passion for me because I believe, and it's even more reinforced from what I know about the NCLs, as well as many other childhood onset diseases, that to truly cure these diseases, you have to diagnose it before they present with symptoms. That doesn't mean that all of the wonderful work that's happening isn't going to benefit your adults and children with diseases. That's not it at all. We can still try to make their life as good as possible, but to clearly avoid start of the disease process in the first place, to actually not have to reverse disease, but to have the opportunity to diagnose it first and then intervene and not have that child develop a disease. That to me is the ultimate end game. That's what's going to help us cure neurodegenerative disease. And that's really my passion. So what is newborn screening? How many of you remember, or when you had your child, do you remember anything about newborn screening? Did anyone talk to you about newborn screening? Just raise your hand. That's better than most, but very few. I don't even remember anyone saying anything about newborn screening to me when I had my child. I had my child, Sam, at Newton Wellesley Hospital, sort of after I just finished all of this extensive training, and it was a wonderful experience. I don't remember anyone mentioning it. I knew he was going to have it because I knew about newborn screening. but it just doesn't come up. Why don't you know about newborn screening? Newborn screening is one of the most effective public health programs we have in this country. We're actually a leader in the world in terms of the number of diseases we screen in newborns. But it's a public health initiative, and what does that mean? It means that in its current form, no one comes and asks you for consent, that we've made a decision as a culture to actually screen babies for things that we know are irreversibly damaging to that child, because we think it's in the best interest of that child that's being born, not even to ask you permission. We don't care what you think, in a way, right? We don't care what you think because we don't want to miss a low thyroid level at birth and have you think about, oh gosh, do I want to be screened for my child for thyroid disease? They look fine, to come down 6 months down the line and have irreversible brain injury and mental retardation and terrible outcomes. So that was, the first disorder that really was a success story is something that maybe all of you have heard about and maybe you haven't. Most of you are going to see it on your Diet Coke cans, phenylketonuria. You know, why is there a warning for phenylketonuria on your Diet Coke can? Well, because they have to restrict their phenylalanine intake. PKU was one of the most horrific diseases of neurodegeneration. It had progressive white matter disease, progressive spasticity, progressive cognitive decline. They had mood and behavioral problems. They had Parkinsonism. I saw some of those adults who had been missed before we started doing newborn screening during my training in Massachusetts. That was a horrific disease. But by identifying on a blood spot obtained from a heel prick from a newborn at birth and checking a phenylalanine level, you can pick up those babies, and by simply restricting the amount of one amino acid in their diet, it's cured. Now, that's an overstatement. Nothing is really cured. They still have their genetic disease. They still have a bad, okay. That's okay. I'd like to move, so I guess I'll just be stuck here. That's okay. So, in order to be successful for neurodegeneration, I think number one is, while we want to work very hard to improve the quality of life and to have symptomatic treatments, our end game goal for all rare diseases would be to try to prevent them in the first place or to treat them as early as possible. So, but to be successful, you have to do whole population screening. In preparation for this talk, I was trying to actually look at the different forms of the NCLs and to try to figure out what is the actual epidemiology, what's the incidence of all these different, what's the prevalence. There's not very good data on that. And how can you even begin to actually figure out what your population is, how many kids you're missing, if you don't actually know, if you don't have good population? And the best studies are in Europe. There are some good studies, but they're relatively small populations. And so we really don't know worldwide how many patients are being born with these disorders. We don't know how many are in institutions in their 60s that never got diagnosed. We don't know how many died in childhood without being diagnosed. We just don't simply know a lot of that, but we're getting a lot better at that kind of thing. So, but the key to successful newborn screening is that you have to screen thousands and thousands of babies before you identify a single positive case. And where I've been advocating for that for a rare disease that I've had a lot of passion about is for spinal muscular atrophy. It's relatively common with a birth rate incidence of 1 in 10,000. None of the NCLs are close to that at all. And so when you're, the further out you get, the more babies you have to screen. So we have 70,000 births a year in Massachusetts. You might have to screen for how many years, or, you know, I don't know exactly for the NCLs. We don't really have good incidence data at the early population level that's robust enough to really tell us what those numbers are. And please correct me if I'm missing some data that's out there that because again, I'm new to this group of diseases in terms of all of the background information. So that's an important lesson. So US, as I said, is the most proactive in the world. Each state has independent program. It's funded through the Department of Health, but the state legislature in each individual state decides how much money the program gets, what the infrastructure is for screening, and how many diseases and what methods are going to be used for screening the newborn spots. And remember, so what this has done originally, as of 10, 20 years ago, there was an increasing discrepancy between, I'll say it, liberal states who wanted public health support and would give more money for their programs, and conservative states like Texas who didn't want to give any money, or Utah who were already tithing 10% to the Mormon Church and didn't have any more money to give. And what that led to was a discrepancy from one state to another about how many disorders were screened. And so when I was training in neurology and started my genetics fellowship in '94, some states in the US were only screening for 6 diseases, and some were starting to screen for many more. That changed dramatically with the advent of tandem mass spectrometry, which is a technology where you can take a single spot and screen for a whole bunch of metabolites. And now in the US, between 36 to 50 disorders are screened for in every state in the US. And in Europe, it's widely variable, but they've also instituted broad screening for most of the diseases, and it depends on whether you're part of that union or not, and various differences. In Latin America and South America, again, widely variable from state to state. The U.S. derives additional federal support for helping to do some of this, so states can apply for grants to help get additional funding for pilot projects. They can get additional funding for all sorts of things, and there's 8 regional collaboratives. So Midwest region has 4 or 5 states grouped together, and we have lots of different ways of dividing this up. However, what's happened in the last 5 years is that now people are increasingly aware that we have a blood spot that's collected on virtually every baby in the U.S., that overall 97% of all births across the U.S., we have a blood spot. It also became apparent to the public that we weren't asking permission for this. And it further became apparent, particularly to very concerned parents who were worried about privacy issues, that we were starting to do whole genome technologies. We were starting to do genetic studies well beyond what the original newborn screening program was meant to address. So some of the concerns that were raised, I'll just give you an example. What if my son gets pulled over for a traffic stop, and somehow his blood spot was tested and that data gets entered into the DNA database, and there's mistaken problem, or what if, we could find any rapist if we wanted, if we just used newborn blood spots, right? Everybody wants their hands on blood spots. That really wasn't even happening, but there was the concern that it was going to happen. So that was a huge issue, and lawsuits have become increasingly common. So in Wisconsin, we almost lost newborn screening in the state because there was a bad lawsuit. The state legislature voted to stop it altogether and to address this issue, and then finally it was overcome. We also had several lawsuits where patients were identified with, as we got to DNA-based screening for cystic fibrosis, patients were identified with mutations that just affected sperm motility. And parents would say, why do I want to know that my newborn baby boy is going to have a sperm motility problem and nothing else, and you worried me that he was going to have cystic fibrosis, and all of these things. So fortunately, cystic fibrosis, actually, that happens very rarely because mostly it's still an enzyme test. But increasingly we're going to DNA-based assays. And so we have to think about this as a community, and you guys have to be proactive as a community if we really want to make true inroads on curing these diseases. So why would you newborn screen for neuroceroid lipofuscinosis? Newborn screening, as I said, is a public health program. Therefore, it's very rigorously controlled. You essentially have to have nearly a cure or a very, very transformative therapy in order to get put on the newborn screening panel. Now, partly I told you tandem mass spec changed everything because that was a technology-driven thing. So it's true that actually on the current newborn screening panel, there are diseases identified that are bad diseases, and even completely benign disorders for which we identify in the newborn screening, and they're never going to develop disease, and that's created angst. So an example would be some of the fatty acid oxidation defects. Those are kids that might develop symptoms and terrible consequences under certain circumstances, but they might never, depending on what mutation they have in a gene. So they might get picked up, identified. They might or may not have a risk factor for developing a consequence. We don't know when, and it raises a huge amount of anxiety for the parents. And we don't have any public program in place to follow up these people for 10, 20, 30 years to see what happens to them and collect all that data. So why would you want to look at the NCLs? Well, one is it's attractive in several reasons. One is that the most frequent forms have severe outcomes in infancy and early childhood. So that's in its favor for trying to do newborn screening. However, all of you have to ask yourself, if my child wasn't going to be identified with a symptom until 6 or 10, and there was no treatment available, that I knew was going to have a substantial impact? Would I really want to know? Would I want to lose those years? And a lot of parents are the public in general, there are about 5 to 10% of people who say, do not take away that joy that I had. Do not take away that time. I don't want that. I needed that time. If you can't fix it, don't tell me. So it's kind of the don't ask, don't tell mentality. And I get that, because that's really hard if you can't do anything about it. But on the other hand, I've increasingly become aware that our best opportunity for clinical trials is to identify them as early as possible, because unless we can enroll them early enough in a clinical trial, how are we going to prove that these things that look good in animal models are actually going to be able to be proven beneficial in human patients? And one of the biggest, there's a couple lessons recently that have sort of reinforced this. One is Fragile X. Fragile X, that story, we learned so much from the research scientists about the basic pathophysiology of that disease. What is it doing? How could we impact and create benefit in the animal model, improve outcomes? And we can basically cure many diseases like this now. The problem is that when you try to take those same compounds and then you do them in a human clinical trial and you're testing a 20-year-old boy, the horse is out of the barn. There's a lot that have happened over 20 years. Much has happened. There's a lot of irreversible changes, and you're not going to be able to have the impact that you hope to have. Therefore, you take a promising drug that could have helped a newborn had you identified them, and you throw it away after millions and millions of dollars of drug development when it gets to phase 1 and phase 2 trials and fail. So these are important lessons for the community to think about. How can we carefully structure clinical trials for the most promising compounds? How can we advocate for pilot studies for newborn screening to actually do this? And is this even ethical? Is it ethical to screen a whole population to identify a subset of rare disorders cases to enroll them in a clinical trial? The newborn screening programs would say absolutely not ethical in any way unless you had full written consent. You can't possibly afford to do full written consent to get the frequency of screening done and actually do this. So we're in a catch-22 with neurodegeneration, especially for the rarer the disease, the more challenging the problem. So the work that you're doing and the wonderful stuff that's happening at this conference that Kathy Sims started, that Ankala is doing in Europe with her team and across Europe with what John Mink and his team are doing at the University of Rochester, those studies are so critical because you need to understand the natural history of the disease. You need to understand the epidemiology because that's really what's going to get you the support that you need to show the need for newborn screening. And that's the only way you're going to get a cure. I mean, I'm not Debbie Downer here, but I want to be realistic. I want to be rational. I want to say neurodegeneration is a very complex process. And once you damage nerve cells at critical points in development, there's a point of no return at some point. And unless we get drastically more and more aggressive therapies, stem cell therapies. Now, with enzyme deficiencies, there's a lot of hope, though. So I say that. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, because what about Pompe disease? Well, you can see a lot of reversal for certain lysosomal storage diseases after giving enzyme therapy, for instance. You can have an enlarged heart and it can reverse. You can have actual reversal. So I'm not saying that you can't reverse some of it. I'm just saying that there are critical things, particularly with the most severe infantile and early childhood onset forms, that may be irreversible, depending on when you can intervene with those disorders. So what is also a benefit for the NCLs is, all of the work that Kathy Sims and others have done in characterizing molecular defects for these disorders. That's really critical because that clarifies what mutations cause what forms of disease. It helps reduce the chance that when you screen a gene for one of the NCLs that you're going to find something you don't know what to do with. So I'll tell you the other important lesson, bad lesson that's happened for newborn screening has been the Krabbe disease experiment in New York. So Krabbe disease is a horrible, progressive, degenerative white matter disease. There was a foundation that worked really, really hard in New York to get it added legislatively to the newborn screening panel. And they started to screen babies at birth. All babies in New York were screened by legislative mandate. It didn't go through the normal approval process, but it was legislative mandate just in that state. And we started to identify babies with mutations in the gene for Krabbe disease. The problem is that then we would identify a change in the gene, but we didn't know what to do with it because it looked like a change that would cause disease, But what's the treatment for Krabbe disease? It's a bone marrow transplant. The rate of, that's a huge deal. That's a huge therapy. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's a certain death rate associated with it. So what if your child had a variant of unknown significance and you went ahead and did a bone marrow transplant and they died, only you found out 10 years later they didn't actually have Krabbe disease at all? They would have been fine till they were 60. These are the kind of really challenging issues that we really need to face as a community of rare disease specialists. So which NCLs would you even start with if you thought about this? Well, you want to look at what I call low-hanging fruit, the easiest thing, the most practical thing, the disease you have the most information about, and those are going to be the most frequent disease subtypes. You're going to have the largest population for natural history. Is that fair to the patients and families who have the lower frequency disease phenotypes? It has nothing to do with fairness. It has nothing. It's like what you can actually do. It's like what can we actually accomplish? Even if you have NCL, I don't know what's the rarest one, Kathy? Whatever NCL is the rarest one, even if you had that disease and you tried to do it, you might try to do a pilot study for newborn screening and you would have to screen 1 million or 2 blood spots. You wouldn't be able to afford that, number one, and you might get 1 kid. And what are you going to do with that 1 kid? You're not going to be able to show anything. So I think, unless by, there's just a lot of strategic planning that goes in as a community, which is why it's so important for you to stick together, not just among all the diseases as a foundation, but also across the rare disease community to work on issues of mutual interest as a group. So what are the barriers to acceptability for newborn screening pilot studies? One of the biggest is this frequency of anticipated uncertain outcomes. You don't know what this change in this gene means. So the ideal thing has always been enzyme testing, because we think if there's an enzyme that's low, it should mean that that child's going to be affected with something. That's not always true. There's complicated things, but that works well for most things. But once you start to go to DNA-based testing, there's still a lot we don't know about certain changes that occur. So suppose, because most of these are recessive, well, all of them are recessive diseases, if you find 1 mutation in a child, how hard do you look for the second one? What methodology? You might have to sequence, and sequencing is expensive, and look for deletions and duplications. And when you start to add 2 technologies, how do you do that? So do you screen for carriers first, and then only screen the other ones for a second mutation? Probably. How do you do that? How can you afford to do that? And then the other issue is, what do you do when you identify a carrier? Do you need to tell parents that their child's a carrier when it's a newborn? And is that information going to get lost when they reach adult, childbearing age of their own? And you found that they were a carrier. What do you do with that information? So there's a lot of controversial. An example of cystic fibrosis would be, we pick up now when we do, we use the enzyme assay as a primary screen, but more and more labs are going to a primary screen being some of the common mutations. And so then we get into this catch-22 where they aren't really going to develop cystic fibrosis. They have 1 mutation, but then we don't know there's another variant of uncertain significance. We don't know what it means, and so they're in limbo for years. And that's a really uncomfortable place that creates anxiety for people. Now, you're in limbo about lots of things you don't realize that you're in limbo about. So we focus sometimes on those things we shouldn't necessarily focus on, because to me, newborn screening and using these wonderful new genomic technologies will be a fantastic benefit to all rare diseases. And an example of that's happening, there's a wonderful hospital in Virginia. They've done whole genome sequencing and whole exome sequencing in different groups of patients with children born, about 2,100 children born, and they've tried to compare it to how were those babies picked up on newborn screening versus this new technology, and did they pick up additional cases? And they are finding some additional cases that were of value to those individual patients. And that data should be being published in the next year or 2. And that's really important to keep in mind. So, so the lack of definitive therapies for the NCLs is a huge barrier. Even if you have promising therapies, that doesn't mean that's acceptable. You actually have to have a proven definitive therapy. So once you have an effective clinical trial in the NCLs and you show that there's symptomatic benefit or there's slowing of disease progression, whatever, you are in because, for that particular disorder. And then you could go and advocate, but it takes not 1 study, but a couple studies before you get FDA approval at a minimum. You're talking about a 5-year, 10-year trajectory now. You're talking about a long time before you can get to the data that you need to actually get on the recommended uniform screening panel, which is how tests get recommended to be added to newborn screening panels across the U.S. So there's quite a lot of delay in that process. And then even if it's one of the most interesting studies, which is often used as an ethical study, was a study that was done in Wisconsin in the early days of cystic fibrosis screening. So cystic fibrosis screening was controversial for many decades, actually. And only recently did Utah, about 5 years ago, start doing newborn screening for cystic fibrosis. Other states have done this, 15 years ago. And the reason for that was some of the issues. But one of the most interesting studies is that in Wisconsin, they took a group of blood spots and they screened. They said, we're going to randomize, we're going to identify 50% of them we're going to identify early, and the other 50% we're not going to tell anybody about. And we're going to see what happens in a difference in outcomes. And when they followed these kids up in childhood, there was a 15-point IQ difference. And it turned out to be the fact that cystic fibrosis babies, even when they don't present right away, they have abnormal absorption of vitamin E, and that can affect intellectual function. And so no one would ever be able to do a study like that again, because if you're just going to not, that resulted in a lawsuit, by the way, because someone said, God, my kid could have been picked up earlier and gotten enzyme replacement for the pancreas, and I could have had a smarter kid. And you missed that opportunity for me. So I think that there's very complex issues that we have to think about as a community. And definitely it's considered ethically suspect to screen simply to identify patients for your trial. You have to have a plan. What are you going to do with all the kids? Who's going to qualify for your trial? What are you going to do with the ones that don't qualify? How is that in any way helpful? Do you have a medical home for them? Is someone going to follow them indefinitely? What sort of social, psychological support are the families going to have? Because put yourselves in the shoes of someone, they've got their first beautiful newborn baby, they think everything's fine, and they're told that they have one of the NCLs, and we don't have anything to do right now. We can do some physical therapy. We can monitor your child. We can enroll them in early intervention. We can try to make their diet as good as possible. I mean, you can put a positive spin on it as much as you want. They're still going to look out there and say, but you don't have a therapy. You don't have a cure for this, and that's going to be stressful. So that's where, again, this disease community could come in supporting those individuals if we come to the point where we're doing newborn screening. And not all of them are going to be eligible to think about, if we do a pilot study, how would we do that? What would be the consequences? How would we support those families, and so on? So, are we ready for NBS and the NCLs? I hope I've shown you absolutely 100% no. That being said, technology drives everything. And I wouldn't be surprised, a lot of the lysosomal storage diseases are being added to newborn screening panels. But let's look at a sobering fact. Pompe disease, which has had a therapy that was just a slam dunk, definite benefit for the infantile form of the disease. We are just now, just in the last month or two, the federal panel called the Secretary's Advisory Committee for Newborn Screening in the U.S. just a month or two ago, after all of that work and many trials and much success with an effective enzyme therapy, is it getting added to the newborn screening state panels. So that's why you have to think about, for rare diseases where you don't have therapy, how do you do a pilot study? And that's what I did with SMA. I submitted, the proposal for spinal muscular atrophy. So I'll use that as a little bit of an example to kind of show you why we did that and what justification we used. And I got a federal grant to fund that. And then we started to do screening, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the lessons from that. So our arguments for newborn screening right now in rare diseases that aren't acceptable to add them to the regular panel for public health, but would be reasonable things: avoidance of the diagnostic odyssey. Just meeting new families here, I've heard of delays anywhere from 6 months to 9 years. That's 9 years, a long time. Proactive care is prolonging survival without clear transformative improvements. So could we give that proactive care earlier? Would earlier nutrition make a difference? Is there anything that we have that supports you could do something different to improve outcomes? And then, not that it's considered ethical at this point, but we do need to facilitate early participation in clinical trials. And how would you normally prove a clinical trial works? Well, you would do it against placebo. How do you avoid doing a trial against placebo? How is that ethical to identify these newborns? You think you have a therapy, but some of them are going to get the placebo. That, you know, that's sometimes the only way to prove a therapy works. So people think of creative designs like, could you do a lower dose and a higher dose? Could you do a 2-to-1 randomization where you take one group and you do a delayed treatment, et cetera? There's problems with all of those scenarios. That's, again, why the natural history data can be so critical. Unfortunately, our FDA and the EMA in Europe, they have a lot of trouble accepting natural history these days for any study. That Pompeii was successfully used because there wasn't a lot of proactive intervention being done in Pompeii. But for this group of diseases, I think because it's so broadly heterogeneous, there's so many differences from child to child and different mutations and things like that, it's going to be a challenge. So all of these things are going to require ongoing, like you have to think now, even if we don't think we're going to do newborn screening for 5 years or 10 years, depending on what the scenario is, you have to think about these issues now and plan and strategically plan for those things. So what's the conceptual framework right now? Well, you could do pilot data from SIB pairs, right? You could take the families, it would be very important to look at all of the SIB pairs and was there any difference in care that was provided? Was the younger SIB diagnosed earlier? Because most SIB pairs are going to have the same mutations. That being said, we know there are genetic modifiers. We know that SIBs are different anyway. It doesn't necessarily mean, and so but you need to capture all of those. You need to capture all of them in Europe. You need to capture them, all of them around the world, because you got to get the numbers. And we have to collaborate as a community. You can't have John Meek's database and Kathy Sims' database or Kathy Swoboda and Angela's database. So it has to be a community effort. And unless you can do that community effort in a very challenging academic environment, and unless you can provide funding to help the researchers survive, even though they're giving away their data because someone else got the funding for it, it will not work. I'm just going to tell you, I've seen it fail many, many times for many rare diseases. And there's always going to be multiple foundations for each rare disease. There's always going to be different things. And already, from the moment I walked in the door, there's politics. I see it at every rare disease meeting I go to. Don't let that hold you back. Just work together strategically as best you can, wherever people are, and understand that there's always going to be personalities, and that doesn't need to stop progress. But you have to work together as a team. So I do think at some point, once you figure out what methodology you would use for screening, and if you considered what kind of assay you could use, you're going to need to do some pilot studies. But those are going to have to be population-based, statewide or countrywide population studies. They may happen by accident in some of the genome newborn screening studies that are happening in any case. So SMA, this was sort of my neurodegenerative disease that I've worked on in terms of this issue. I got interested in spinal muscular atrophy because I wasn't getting, honestly, I started out working in movement disorders. I trained at Boston Children's, and of course I was in the MDA clinic. I was seeing lots of patients, but I started out trying to find the genes for paroxysmal kinesiogenic dyskinesia, and I cloned a translocation breakpoint looking for a gene for alternating hemiplegia of childhood in a family whose translocation between 2 chromosomes turned out to have nothing to do with the gene. And it was only after 16 years that we just found the gene for that disorder. So that rare disorder is something that has a single gene. We have a database of 300 patients. We have a lot of data. But even that, with that many patients, so we're working at smaller numbers here. So you have to think about that without combining. So, but the plus for SMA, why was it a good case for these kind of pilot studies? Well, because SMA1, which presents before 6 months, occurs in 50% of all the babies. 50% rapidly have neurodegeneration and denervation. They have respiratory and bulbar insufficiency. They lose their swallow. They're hypotonic, and they have premature death and are ventilator dependence in the majority by age 2 years. So fully 50% of your population have a very bad outcome. That's a reason to promote early diagnosis. And along with that, though, we also had so many promising therapies in animal models. We've cured the SMA animal model multiple times over, giving early intervention. And so that data on the basic science side heavily, heavily supported doing some newborn screening pilot studies to try to get, or to do SIB pair early recruitment, which is what we're doing for our current nurture study in SMA. The other thing is that even though only 50% were babies, another 20 to 30% had very severe childhood onset forms. So you're talking about the majority of the population accounted for very early presentation. So all of them in this group with SMA 1 and 2 present before 18 months of age. That's not true for the NCL. So the NCL, they can present first time, 6, 7, 8, or even later. that's a big delay between newborn screening and having a 6-year-old, right? And so, that's important to keep in mind. So we've had a lot of support from, there's a whole community working on newborn screening issues. The Newborn Screening Translational Research Network is something that's funded by NICHD. There's a number of working groups that I've participated in. There's ethical and legal working groups. There's clinical integration working groups. There are a lot of support for design of CRFs for longitudinal population data repository. I mention this now because you have to think about this now, because already we're doing the CRFs for disorders that are already screenable at the NIH funding level, where we're creating this longitudinal database. What's the biggest barrier, do you think, that we've seen with this database? Academic physicians who have spent their life researching a rare disease, and they don't want to give up their data to put it in one joint US database. They don't want to. They can't afford to, because their grant writing depends on it. They're afraid to. So the whole project is at risk of not working because of this kind of issue that we have to overcome. Okay, so early groundwork needed for you guys. I mean, just starting with the basics, what would be the acceptability in your community? What would you think about? Would it have been okay to have your kid diagnosed as a newborn? Do surveys, figure this out, ask your patients, the families, would it have been better for you to know as a newborn under current circumstances? What about if there was a modestly effective therapy? What about if there was only proactive care, but no life-changing therapy? What if there was a cure? What if there was, you have to ask it in multiple different levels, because you need to know what's the support for the community. The next thing you need would be a formally solicited population-based assessment for an acceptable model for how you would get consent or screening. That's something the community has to work on. You guys can't work on that on your own. It's just, it's too complicated. There's too many diseases that need early identification. And then you need to have ongoing regular meetings with all stakeholders, and stakeholders across the public health sphere, the private sphere, the families of rare diseases, but also the general population whose child might be accidentally screened as positive, and it was a false positive. But it was a problem with the test, but even so, they got called in and they got all this concern raised that their child had a disease, and then you have to tell them it wasn't. And what's the population's willingness to tolerate that? What percent of error are they willing to tolerate? And the good thing about genomic diseases is that we're gaining more information, but that's why these genotype-phenotype studies are so important. And then you need validation of a cost-effective screening technology. You can't afford to do whole genomes on every baby born in the US. That's not going to work. You can't afford, tandem mass spec got cheap enough, but on average, each newborn screening program spends about, just for the blood spot kits and all of the stuff, they're talking about $105, $110 per baby, every baby born in the US, and it ranges up to $200. That gets to be a large health cost. Now, if you're screening for everything, you get better benefit for your cost, but not if you're creating anxiety and creating more problems and just spinning your wheels. So I think those are a lot of the issues. And I put some of our work on SMA just as ideas for things that we had to do to set the groundwork to get our newborn screening pilots for SMA going. So I'm not going to go over the rest of the details. You don't need to hear about that. But the bottom line is I did this SMA pilot. It was originally funded for 3 full states. And the bottom line is that it failed. It failed because we only were able to do consent funding, consented screening. We tried to get population-based support across whole populations in Ohio, Colorado, and Utah. Ohio dropped out because it was too difficult, because the state lab was at a different place than the molecular lab, and you couldn't get the samples there. There wasn't enough funding, and they had a different technology they wanted to use, so they dropped out. And then, Colorado and Utah, we originally had full state buy-in. That was still a good number of births a year, because we had about 70,000 a year in Colorado. We had about $55 births a year in Utah. So between the two, we could have identified a good 12 babies with SMA a year. But however, the Department of Health lawyers were so worried about the increasing lawsuits, they said, what if you get it wrong? We're not going to do an opt-out consent model, even though you've done these public focus groups, even though you know that the majority population, there are this 5% of people say, I wouldn't want to know. And are you just going to ignore them? And so that also failed. So we ended up doing consents at a much more rigorous level. We do individual hospital consents in Colorado. We screened a total of, I'll show you the numbers. So we screened a total of about 3,300 women births in Utah, because we only were able to do a single hospital. We screened a total of about 15 birthing centers and did about 25,000 ultimately in Colorado. Didn't identify a single case of SMA. It's supposed to be 1 in 10,000. Bad luck, who knows? I mean, you know, we saw other numbers outside where we did it, but it's this whole problem of the numbers game. You cannot do this kind of stuff without full population-based screening. So I'm gonna just say the final thing before I, how are we doing on time? We're done. So let me just say that one of the bad things that happened this last year, one of the worst things to happen to newborn screening since its inception has been this a rider that was added at the last minute, and it's going to affect all rare diseases. And it was added by Rand Paul to the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act. This was an act that has funded the newborn screening federal part of the support for decades. It's been repeatedly reapproved every few years, no problem. But there was a last-minute rider added by Senator Rand Paul at the request of a small group of individuals concerned about the privacy issue for innate in storing long-term blood spots for use, even de-identified use for lab reasons. And what happened with that is this new language got added in that means you have to have a signature written consent from a parent for any study, any pilot study that's not already on the list of mandated for any federal funding. So I had, $750,000 of government funds a year for this project that we were doing. It got winnowed down, and then we lost our ability to use any of this funding altogether for our whole SMA newborn screening because of this rider that was added. And again, I can guarantee you no one read it. No one knew. So now we're scrambling after the fact. We're having the lawyers do it. How are we going to do pilot studies going forward if we have to get a full written consent from every single person and screen all these? So we're in a very challenging situation right now. We have to figure out how to do that. So what are the positives? I think you as a community should think about partnering with other rare disease organizations on this issue. You could consider funding a single or small group of states to identify a cohort for recruitment into natural history studies to start. You're already doing the natural history studies you need to do, but a lot more funding has to go into that if you're going to get data and a lot more collaboration across international lines. And then you need to more broadly target, do carefully conducted, or you can consider alternate pilot models. There's a lot of creative ways you could do it, but you have to get all the stakeholders involved. And finally, you could do, one of the things we're considering as a community could there be another way to capture babies not at the hospital level, the newborn screening? Could you collect another blood spot at the 2-week followed with a pediatrician and then hold that and then do response under a different mechanism? So that's one idea. It's called second tier pilot. And that's being considered for Fragile X, where it's been controversial because you identify carriers who might be at risk of having onset of their own symptoms, especially women. Fragile X is an X-linked disease in which boys have very early involvement, but many girls have later disease that they might not show up till 50s, 60s, or 70s. And so, and even some males have milder mutations that might show up later. So that's important. And then ultimately, is this going to go away because technology drives everything and everyone's going to go whole genome at birth? Some people think that. I'm not sure we're going to get there anytime soon, but I will just acknowledge Kathy, first and foremost, for inviting me to join her in this wonderful meeting, along with Beyond Batten and BDSRA board. And thank you very much for inviting me, and all these people I've worked with on newborn screening issues that I won't go into in detail, but thank you for your time.
My name is Margie Frazier, and I'm the Executive Director at BDSRA. We're thrilled you're here. We've had quite a morning already. I just had a blast with all of these speakers and good friends, many of whom are here from foreign countries. We have people from all over the world here. Great Britain, the British invasion is here. The Germans arrived at 2 in the morning. The Serbs have been here for a couple of days already. So let's welcome them, the warm American welcome. Thank you. And our and our Canadian friends to the north, but we consider the Canucks part of us. You are part of us, you gears back in the corner there. You are part of us, you Canadians in North America. I have 5 slides. Let's see if I can get through them in no more than 7 minutes, because I'm sharing my time. I'm ceding a lot of my time to go to Dr. Angela Schultz, who is here, who we fund. You heard Dr. Swoboda talking about the importance of registry work. Angela is in partnership with our American registry partners, collecting data around the world on our kids. And it's very, very important data that leads to things like clinical trials. And so we have clinical trials now going around the world for CLN2, and Dr. Schultz can talk a little bit about that because she's treating many of the kids who are in the CLN2 Balmarin trial. I'm going to just click right through these. BDSRA in review for this year. Things are going pretty well. We've come through the recession. Is that a beautiful moment or what? We have clean audits with a budget of nearly $1 million this year. The finances are sound with investments in appropriate risk categories. We settled some of that yesterday, and I just want to wave to my finance team. Bob Jensen just left the room. What the heck? Come on! We have a growing donor base. Last year, I think extra money that came in just to support you being at conference was around $37,000. This year, it's $90,000. That is huge. That's huge. And because we have donors like you, we're an organization of small checks. We are an organization of very, very broad-based small checks. And that's heartening for our staff. Every single day, we get love notes from people. It's a beautiful thing. It's just an amazing thing. We had someone donate last week who, for a child they'd never met, but were so touched by their face on Facebook, and so now she's giving us $40 a month on her credit card. These are beautiful, beautiful sentiments we get. In fact, one of our children, we've gotten 30 donations in her name overnight because her mom is here, and she passed earlier this year. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Let's talk some partners. We have amazing partners. Could our industry partners raise their hand? Balmarin's here. They're one of our lovely, lovely, lovely sponsors. We also have a new friend, Michelle, who's from Abiona Therapeutics. She's here today with us as well. She's going to be working with Tammy Killian's lab on gene therapy and CLN3, so that's very exciting. She'll have a poster at the poster session tomorrow, so I hope you welcome her warmly. She is lovely. I got to sit down with her yesterday. She's great. Okay, so we have this partner we have to talk about. I want you all to get on your smartphones, like you can even do it now while I'm talking because I know these slides are compelling. MakeupGeek.com. Let me tell you about Makeup Geek. Makeup Geek there's a cousin connection with the Alios. Am I correct? It's the Alio family. There is a makeup color of eyeshadow just about the color of my sweater called Caitlin Rose. Caitlin Rose proceeds come to BDSRA for family support and CLN3 research. I'm happy to report that since December, in eyeshadow sales, we've gotten $120,000. Right? So, what we're thinking is that anybody can afford a $9.99. My husband, the intern, is willing to wear eyeshadow if it'll raise money. So no one is off the hook in the audience about your eyeshadow. I'm just saying. So everybody has a college girl in their family, someone who is willing to wear kind of this color. I will wear it, darn it. Support Makeup Geek. Make it go viral. Get it out there. Do you have do you know somebody who's in a sorority who goes to, like Northwestern, their colors are purple. It's $9.99. If we could make everybody in this room tell people to buy it, it's an easy ask. It's simple, easy ask, and Hanukkah and Christmas are not that far away. I bought 5 pallets myself, and some lucky winner tomorrow, or today at lunch actually, in about 15 minutes we'll get one in a drawing. So I just want to talk about partners. I'm already into my 7 minutes, I realize. Okay, support. The top one is the most important. We embrace everyone, every form, at every stage, everyone. Grandparents, cousins, kids, everyone. Everyone is at the table. Your grief is not time limited. My friend Andrea West at the Batten Disease Family Association says this in her talk every single time, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it's something like you know about our organization, but it's true. Your grief is not time limited. And we know that there's a lot of trauma and loss in this disease, and that's why we come together to share, because no one has to explain a thing when they're at this conference for 3 days. It's a beautiful thing. So we have 450 people here, can you believe it? It's just phenomenal. I think we all need to thank staff members and those amazing volunteers who are checking people in, because I haven't heard any screaming yet, which is awesome. We have a full-time social worker in the office, Becky Hedeberg. I don't think Becky's in here right now. Oh, Becky Hedeberg. There she is, over in the corner. Becky is our Director of Support and Education. She provides warm referrals. She will help you in your local community find the right people to talk to. Advocacy. We write an enormous number of letters to school systems, to insurance companies, and to the military. And I think some of our families know that even we can impact the Pentagon. And we have worked very diligently with those families who are in the clinical trials for CLN2 who are with Dr. Emily De Los Rios, there, Emily, in the trial. These are amazing, amazing, beautiful families who I'm happy to say are now 5 minutes from my office because I get to see them all the time, and they're beautiful children. If you get a chance to talk with them while you're here, I hope you welcome them warmly. They're troopers, and we love them. We're continuing to renew our materials, and with the help of very lovely donors, we're going to be able to translate some of them into Spanish, because we have 20 different countries on our Facebook page. And so somebody from Turkey just emailed me today, and I know no Turkish, so if any of you out there can help me, I'm in. Boyana, you're the closest. Come on. All right, we'll work on it. Advocacy. I believe that advocacy is a day-to-day storytelling by all of you. We think of advocacy as storming the hill, but advocacy is telling your story every chance you get, every chance you are able, every chance that you can, to anybody, because you never know who you're going to meet. Did everybody know you were going to meet Jarrett Payton today? Some people were kind of surprised. He heard a lot of your stories in the hallway. You never know who you're going to meet, so say it loud and proud. One of the things that we worked on the most, and I want to salute again Tracy Van Houten for all of his advocacy work, is 21st Century Cures. Are there any alerts that we need to do today? It passed! Applause! More families than ever went to the Hill this year for a Rare Week, and those families, I see Marlo. Marlo was there with Dante. Not only was Marlo there, Marlo was pushing a wheelchair with Dante, so thank you. Is the Coyne family here? Hello! I haven't met you yet, but now I see you. They were all there as well, and the Van Houtens, and who am I forgetting? Sherry! was there as well. Awesome. So we had an amazing crew there. I had hurt my foot in Germany and couldn't go, but Tracy went and stormed for us. So if going to Washington for Rare Week is something that interests you, we would love to talk to you about that. It's a life-changing experience. Bring your pedometer. You will walk 20,000 steps. But you will tell stories that will make a difference, like 21st Century Cures, to get more funds into FDA, NIH, and to incentivize companies to do rare disease work. This is my last slide, I promise. Tomorrow night we're going to announce funding that's going to leverage about $400,000 this year. And it doesn't seem like a lot oftentimes in these dollars, but these dollars, as you know, were raised at 5Ks on Saturday morning by parents in the rain, selling Rice Krispie treats to runners while they had 2 kids in wheelchairs. In my opinion, this is the most sacred money that's ever been raised, ever. And we embrace every single donation that comes in, and everybody gets a thank you note from me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we'll make those announcements tomorrow night at the banquet of the research winners. I understand from Tracy Kirby, who is our new development director, that about 40 people have contacted her to do fundraisers this year. So that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. We're very excited to hear all of the ideas. She's coming up with a 5K in a box idea. We're going to have much more online for people to be jumping in while you're wearing your makeup, geek, eyeshadow, every single one of you. The last bullet point leads me to my introduction to Dr. Angela Schultz from Hamburg, Eppendorf Hospital. She is a lovely, lovely presence, an exceptionally skilled clinician. She and her colleague, Miriam Nickel, are here. They landed at 2 a.m., and she's still willing to talk to you about registries. We, as an organization, have funded her and many of the other people in the registry world, and she's going to spend, I've asked her to spend 10 to 15 minutes, not long, talking about why this is so important and why we want you to participate in the registries while you're here. And without further ado, I know that your resume is very long, but I'm gonna cede that and bring you up now. Dr. Schultz. I'm sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Marty, for your kind introduction, for your invitation to be here. It's an honor. It's a big pleasure for me to be here. This is my second BDSRA meeting. The first one was back in 2003. I had just started my postdoc with Rosemary Bustani. I was new to the lab. I was kind of new to the NCL field, and she brought me to this meeting. And I will never forget the kids' parade that evening, and it was so, so inspiring and such a big pleasure to be here today. So I will try to be very quick and brief. I think Kathy Swoboda has really beautifully laid the groundwork for me, really being an advocate for collaboration between all international clinicians and NCL experts. And I think I can give you some examples for this. I'm here today not as me, Angela Schultz. I'm here on behalf of a consortium that has been generously funded by you, by your fundraised money. So I'm really just one of many who have really put their effort into this. And we call it the Batten-Child NCL Patient Database. Batten-Child stands for Dementia in Childhood, and we think the NCLs are a good example for this. And we're trying to develop a tool for evaluation of therapies in the NCLs. These are the 3 topics I will give you a brief overview on. So what are our database characteristics? I don't want to go into detail. I think the main message is it's an online database, so any clinician out there can use it in your office. You don't need something special. And the last point here, I think is also very important. We all
agreed on a charter which sets the rules about data ownership, publication, etc. So it's really about collaboration, that nobody is left behind. Nobody has the impression that we're taking data away. This is really a collaborative effort. And the statistical data analyzing features, when it comes to statistics, I am not a good expert. I'm trying to find our statistician and ask for help. But sometimes when we see patients in our clinic, in our NCL clinic, you look at a kid and you're like, this kid is really doing worse than another kid. And this is all of a sudden. And this does not really fit the disease course. So maybe something's going wrong. Maybe we as doctors are doing something wrong. So I can go to the database, put the clinical scoring data of this kid into it and compare it with all of the children with the same NCL type or the same mutation and the same kind of medication or different ones. And it's easier for us to figure out whether we are maybe doing something wrong, whether it's not just the disease progression, but maybe the wrong medication. I'm sure you're much more expert in this than we are, because we really learn from you as families what's good and what doesn't work. We really rely on your experience here. So who's participating in this database? The countries I'm showing you here are really the ones who've started to lay the groundwork over the last years. On the right side here, you have the European countries that started more than 3 years ago because we were funded by the European Commission. And then with more funding we received from you via the BDSRA, the BDFA, and others, I'll go into detail in a bit, have joined us, more European countries, South American countries, centers from the US. What kind of data do we collect? We use data from interviews with you as parents and families. We look into patient charts, and we call this retrospective data. So we go back in history. But we also want to go forward and see patients on a regular basis. Things like John Mink is doing here, using this meeting to collect data, to learn from you how the disease progresses. And in some countries, we're very lucky due to our healthcare system to do this in one center. In other countries, it might be more difficult. So ways like using this meeting here, I think it's an excellent solution. And there are many different data that we collect, but I will show you some example. So if we look at the static data that we collect from patient charts, of course, this is diagnosis, etc. We have also something that we call a virtual biorepository, where we collect information, what patient material is available and where. We can collect numbers. Kathy had indicated this. We need better data on how frequent are what types of NCLs. We have some data here from European countries, but I think this can be improved dramatically, and we need to work on this. And this is something that you all know much better than we do. Early symptoms. How long does it take to diagnose the disease? When we asked our families with CLN2 disease, at what age did you see the first symptoms that led you to visit a child neurologist or specialist? And usually that seizure is the first symptoms, is about at 3 years. However, the diagnosis in most cases is made more than 2 years later. And this is a very, very bad delay. And by that time, the disease has progressed. You've seen many specialists, you might have younger children, and we need to work to improve this. So what can we do? By using the database, we went back in history and we asked all the parents, did you see anything special in your children? And many of them told us, well, they were kind of late talkers. That's not uncommon, especially in boys. So now the pediatrician really found that this is something to be worried about. But if we put this together and look at control data from the entire children's population, we see that many CLN2 kids have this symptom of being a late talker. So based on our data, we really think that a combination of a delay in language development, so a late talker who then develops a seizure for an unknown reason, should be screened for CLN2 disease. At least the disease should be excluded. I'm not saying everybody has CLN2 disease with the symptoms, but I think it should show a red flag to every pediatrician and child neurologist out there, and we're trying to heavily advocate this.
We're not at least in Germany, we're not allowed to do newborn screening as yet, as Kathy has beautifully showed what the problems are. But maybe we can use the time to do like something like targeted diagnostics to improve early diagnosis, and we all know how important this is. Dynamic data, so this is going forward, looking for the future, seeing patients on a regular basis. What can we learn from this? One example here, you see patients' numbers. We have almost 200 patients where we were able to collect this type of data so far. And this is a graph that basically shows how dramatically a CLN2 patient loses motor and language function. And in this audience, I don't have to explain this, you know this far better than we do. That over the period of 2 years, these children really dramatically deteriorate. And we can kind of measure this in the scoring and say that they use 2 scoring points per year or even more. Why do we measure this? I will come to this in a minute. You also know that the brain dramatically shrinks. We can also measure this by measuring the brain volume. And we know that these children lose 50% of their brain volume over the period of 4 years. CRN3, again, here we can measure the loss of language and motor function. But we can also learn something. For example, in this one child that you show here in green, in the end, this young man gets better. He gains scoring points. What happened here? Well, when he lost the scoring point, we did an ECG because we knew that sometimes the heart is affected in these older young men and women with CRN3 disease, and we found that he had a severe heart problem. His heart stopped beating for more than 6 seconds repeatedly. So otherwise, he had been very, very stable in his disease, surprisingly stable. So parents decided to put him on a pacemaker, and he improved. And we see this in other organs of the body, and we see that the heart is really sometimes severely affected, and that's something that we've learned from this data. So what are our goals and our future goals of the database? We think we need to really develop a tool for experimental therapy studies, and I think we could show that this is actually possible. Martin had already indicated that there's a phase 1/2 clinical trial for intraventricular enzyme replacement therapy in CLN2 disease. You will hear much more about it from the biomarine team tomorrow, so I won't go into detail. I only want to say that the natural history data, the data where we measure disease progression in CLN2 patients, are provided by us to biomarine because that's the goal of the Digital Database Consortium, so that they can use it as a control data set. So in this trial, there is no need for placebo treatment group. Everybody gets the medication. And there was no need to do first a natural history trial for a year or 2. So we could actually gain time. And this is shown here in this time axis. This trial started in September, October 2013. By 12 to 14, so within about 14 months, we had full enrollment of 24 patients, 12 in Hamburg, another 12 in London, Rome, and here in Ohio. So I think this is an extremely short time span, and you all know that time is really of the essence in these children. And the more time we can gain, the better we can help our children. So we have already intensified international collaboration, but I think we can always do better. We should also work on better clinical rating scales. But if we go to the international collaboration, I'm very happy to say that our consortium is growing. We have new centers joining from Spain, Italy, Netherlands, Japan. We have 3 centers from the US who would like to join. We have Heather House in the UK. We have a center in Poland. So we're all at different steps starting collaborations, but I think there's a tremendous spirit in all these clinical community that we want to collaborate, because I think we all know from you how terrible this disease is. And I must say, I know in research everything is competitive, but among these clinicians, I have seen such a great spirit to collaborate, which is really amazing. So I would like to really thank all of them for this great spirit and this collaboration and to allow me to present this today. We also would like you to be more involved, maybe even involved in entering data, answering quality of life questionnaires, and we're working on this so that you're more directly involved and able to provide us with data. Another way to really improve collaboration is that we want to have annual register workshops. The next one will be end of November. We will have this as a kickoff workshop in Hamburg. And I tried to find a good day where everybody from all these clinicians would be able to come, and I sent out a doodle link. And then I thought, oh, this will be impossible to get everybody on one day. So I had like 3 weekends to choose from. Within 2 days, everybody you've seen here from all these different countries had replied, and everybody was able to come to this for this weekend. So I thought that was really, really amazing, because I think they are all extremely busy, but they're willing to dedicate their time to come. We have various funding sources, and I will come to the most important one, the last. We had for 3 years the European Commission to fund the European partners. We have the German Ministry for Research, who's going to start fund us in 2016 for another 3 years. We have Batten, who has funded us as a thank you for providing them with natural history data. And I'm very happy that those countries who collected the natural history data, most of the European countries, unanimously said, we don't want to keep that money, we'll give it to the new partners. So I think that's the best sign for collaboration, to kind of pass on the money to allow others to collaborate. And most importantly, there's the BDSRA, and also for budget BDF and many others who have generously funded us over the last year. And I would really, really like to thank you on behalf of all the consortium here today. And we could not do this without you, without the patients, the families. We're not smarter, but we're happy and thankful to be able to learn from you and to take this information, collect it, analyze it, and pass it on. So maybe that in the next years we will have more therapies, that we can advance therapies, and finally help all the kids with NCL out there. Thank you.
We only went 15 minutes over. I think that's pretty good. Yes. Lunch will be soon. I encourage you to stay after a little bit and talk with some of our researchers. Marin is here. I'll be around. Where are our board members? Board members. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's pretty good. I encourage you, if you have questions for the board members or for me, we are always available. We're so thrilled to have you here, and it means so much to me that so many turned out to hear this morning's plenary. So enjoy lunch, and make sure we have 2 exceptional sessions this afternoon. One is on symptom management. We have a room full of just expert diagnosticians, geneticists, child neurologists there. Wonderful people. And another one I can't wait to slip in on. We have Barbara Cole here from the United Kingdom, who is an expert in Batten care in the classroom. She's a special education teacher, and she's retired, and as a volunteer goes all over the United Kingdom, which is that's not very little by train. It takes you a long time, doesn't it? It does. So she's going to be on a panel with Joe Willer, grandma, retired special education teacher, grandma to Kate Benrow, and Leanne Lopato from Chicago, who is a special needs teacher as well in CLN2. So we have a really wonderful education panel this afternoon, and we look forward to all of them and the grandparent session. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.